The same guerrilla enemy, our enemy, how can the people of Vietnam be liberated? This is the enemy, real and determined, but his mind is also up in this battle, and where the battle will be won. This village and its people, on Vietnam's southernmost tip, are winning the battle. Although their fortresses of mud, their weapons primitive and undependable, their spirit, ability, and determination has made the difference, a difference which the entire free world should examine closely. This is a story about the people of the village of Binh Hung, South Vietnam. You're in a helicopter flying over communist territory in South Vietnam, making the 300-mile trip from the capital city of Saigon south to the village of Binh Hung. Below is some of the most productive land in the world. This is the Rice Bowl of Asia, and the target of the hungry communist in North Vietnam. This man has dedicated his life to defending the land. His name is Father Nguyen Lac Hoa. He's 53 years old, a Chinese Catholic priest, guerrilla fighter, and the leader of Binh Hung. He's coming home after a week of consultations with government officials in Saigon. And because he's more than just a religious leader to his people, Father Hoa is using this flight to update his military intelligence. His eyes never leave the ground below. Every bit of activity, every change in terrain is recorded on his field map. Then pleasure replaces seriousness on Father Hoa's face as the helicopter approaches Binh Hung. Here is some of the hardest living in the world. The soft, sticky, clay-like mud provides the only solid ground. The helicopter will land on stones, oven-baked from the mud, packed 12 layers deep, so the giant flying machine won't sink in. This is Binh Hung's handmade heliport. The people of the village are out to greet Father Hoa. Their leader has come home. The business of discharging passengers and supplies is quickly done. There are some last-minute instructions from Father Hoa, and then the whirlybird begins its lift, high above the village, pointing its nose for Saigon. And then it'll be gone. And then again, Binh Hung will be isolated from the free world, a tiny oasis of freedom sitting in the middle of a vast land, terrorized and controlled because of the resistance of the village, its defense, and the aggressiveness of its fighting men. This is a village different than others, with a wall and watchtowers manned around the clock, placed every 200 yards on the 5-foot wall of mud. And beyond the wall, a moat, formed by a natural swamp. In it, the foot or body impaling sharpened stakes. Then a barbed wire fence with booby traps on both sides of it, mines beyond it. Compared to the stakes, the booby traps and mines are more sophisticated weapons of war, but like the stakes, they too have been handmade and born of necessity. The sea swallow is the emblem of the Binh Hung village soldier. The bird is migratory, a friend of the peasants, for he rids the land of the deadly insects and pests. Inside the wall, the paths which crisscross this village of mud, divided into plots of water and land, almost in equal amounts. But although life is hard here, these are a busy, spirited, and happy people. Because their struggle with communism has been successful, they are now beginning to realize a relatively free, secure way of life. They've paid for this by fighting and dying, but now they enjoy some of the pleasures of life, which the sacrifices have provided. And throughout this conflict, the pace and the feel of the village has remained the same, not as an army camp, but rather a community. Perhaps because for most of these people, this has been their first real home. Many are refugees, led out of communist China by Father Hoa in 1950. They went to North Vietnam, but stayed only a year because of communism's growth there. So Father Hoa led his people south again to a rubber plantation in Cambodia. By now, the band of Chinese refugees had swelled to 2,000, but fear of communism forced them to flee again, this time in 1959, after Cambodia had established diplomatic relations with Red China. So Father Hoa bribed and smuggled his people out of Cambodia. They all reached South Vietnam safely, then split up, with most going on to Formosa or Laos, or settling elsewhere in Vietnam. 300 refugees stayed with Father Hoa to go to the south and build a home here at Binh Hung. The building here never stops as a symbol of a people's faith in their future. Here, human pile drivers tamp braces down into the mud on a project which will soon provide the foundation for more village homes and buildings. Captured communist prisoners are doing the work, shuttling huge blocks of mud in sampans through a hole cut in the village wall, providing access to the outside moat. Here, more prisoners are slicing the mud building blocks out of the swamp, loading them into small boats. Then, after the voyage through the wall, the blocks are stacked up inside the upright braces to hold the foundation together. It is significant that the enemy now does all of the construction work, for in the old days, the villagers did this work themselves during the day, then at night fought off the communist Viet Cong with sticks and a few old rifles. Although life is much safer now, the nature of the land is still the same. The mud and the water must still be dealt with. But 2.5 years ago, when Father Hoa first brought his people here, they cried in despair when they realized how hard life would be. So they went to work and live in the nearby villages, saw how the Vietnamese natives had learned to survive in these swamps. Soon, Father Hoa's refugees had a little money in their pockets, a lot of faith in their hearts. But all around was the communists who wanted to dominate them. So Father Hoa and his people scooped mud out of the water and piled it up until they had a wall, and then a village, which they called Binh Hung. Binh Hung has a hospital, more correctly a dispensary, and not a very good one. There's no professional medical help here. Supplies are meager and outdated. Father Hoa has trained a few men to perform minor functions, but he administers all major treatments himself, and he's the first to admit that he's not a medical man. But now official interest has come from the United States Public Health Mission in Vietnam, so this situation may improve. But with all of these odds, the enemy, the mud, the lack of supplies, and the need for invention, the spirit of the people of Binh Hung has never faltered. When efforts to get a medical team from the mercy ship Hope to come to Binh Hung failed, disappointment was replaced by a bright courage as the villagers found that they could have hope too. Security begins at Binh Hung, but today definitely doesn't end there. As much as 50 miles away, Father Hoa's men are operating from outposts, Small Binh Hungs beginning to spring up as Father's forward perimeter grows. These men are on patrol, searching for the Viet Cong, making sure the enemy doesn't infiltrate through the perimeter. Because of this plan of expansion, in 2.5 years, the Binh Hung village soldiers have liberated 15,000 people, made an area 90 miles square relatively safe and secure. But the special district of Hai Yen, now under Father's official military responsibility, is 350 miles square, embracing 25,000 villagers. 10,000 people and many miles yet to set free. As Father Hoa vows, there is much to be done. But because of these small outposts and roving patrols operating near and far from Binh Hung, life in all of the villages inside the perimeter can be a better thing. There is now time to think about school and an education for village children. This is Binh Hung's one-room schoolhouse. This is afternoon school. Morning school is religious. After lunch, children reassemble for reading, writing, and arithmetic. The teacher is from Saigon, brought down here by Father Hoa to give his people's children the education many of them never had the opportunity to have. Leaving Binh Hung, a boat patrol moves down the main canal inside the village. The destination is Viet Cong territory to the south. This trip is an important one, for at the end of this river, 6 miles away, is the sea, the Gulf of Siam. And the men of Binh Hung must drive the enemy out of this area, so access to the sea can be theirs. One of Father Hoa's prized possessions is a 16-gauge shotgun given him by an American admirer. The weapon provides him with his only recreation, shooting hawks. There are 3 enemies in this land: the Viet Cong, the hawk, who attacks the villagers' precious poultry, and the rat, who ravages the rice fields. The hawk will be saved for medicinal purposes, for those who believe its body contains ingredients which will cure. Tension grows now as the boats pass communist propaganda billboards, hate slogans painted on mats of woven reed. Many of them say, "Dow Dow Taylor," "Down with Taylor," referring to General Maxwell Taylor and his important visit to Vietnam in late 1961. Although maintenance is constant, the old engines which drive Father Hoa's small fleet of boats are not always dependable, so engine power is replaced here by foot power. And as the patrol continues southward, the walk begins to reveal the real face of communism. Dozens of abandoned and burned huts, once homes of families murdered by the Viet Cong because they supported Father Hoa, or families who fled north to resettle somewhere in the area now protected by Father Hoa's men. Advance patrols from Binh Hung have ripped down countless Viet Cong propaganda posters. Freshly painted, they warn villagers to beware of our party, Father Hoa's imperialist American friends, the ones who come to take pictures of them. A makeshift landmine is found just a few yards ahead, a hand grenade buried alongside the path. A foot kicking the small wire strung across the path would detonate the grenade. Advance patrols have already uncovered a dozen of these. Father Hoa points out the site of a soldier's recent and bloody battle. 4 of the Binh Hung men died here, but at least 20 Viet Cong paid with their lives. A soldier who was in the battle recreates what happened, how the Viet Cong jumped them, how the Binh Hung soldiers finally overcame them, killed the main force, then made the rest of the enemy run. The patrol is now 3 miles south of Binh Hung, entering a village which has a temple for those of the Cao Dai religion. This is a large religious sect in Vietnam, not Buddhist, nor Christian, nor Muslim, but significant in this country because of its size. Outside the Cao Dai temple, a village elder tells Father that the temple priest has been kidnapped by the Viet Cong just 2 days ago. The people in the area are very worried, but afraid to do or say anything about it. This man is risking torture or death by just communicating his concern to Father Hoa. An important factor in the success of Binh Hung has been due to this man, Bernard Yo. His talents are many, he's expert in all. A musician, guerrilla fighter, lobbyist, technician, and dedicated anti-communist, he serves as Father Hua's agent in Saigon, has hand-built a communication system with which he now hopes to link Father's entire district with Binh Hung. The usually gentle, smiling Father Hoa suddenly becomes a tough platoon sergeant as he notices a group of new recruits taking their responsibilities too lightly. His reprimand is sharp. The logic of it cannot be argued, and thus the respect of these new soldiers grows for their leader. The guerrilla in Vietnam uses the ambush as his major strategy. Most of them begin here or in other pools or canals where the shadow of trees and ground cover will hide an enemy until attacked. This is the village of Cao Dai Vam. It's just 4 miles south of Binh Hung. 2 miles farther is the Gulf of Siam, but for Father Hua's troops now it could be 200 miles away and still would be no closer. The dense jungle between this village and thus access to the sea is controlled by the Viet Cong. The village is also Viet Cong dominated. The enemy lives here. His fellow villagers have no choice but to cooperate with him. And as a result, this is a village of decay and physical degeneration. The comparison between Binh Hung and Cao Dai Vam is just as powerful as the difference between East and West Berlin. There is no free economy here. The high shipment taxes charged by the Viet Cong prevent the export of the many products this rich land provides: the rice, the fish, the vegetables, the lumber for charcoal, Vietnam's primary fuel. Because the land is rich, these people can eat and stay warm, but nothing more. The marks of village prosperity, like chickens, ducks, pigeons, and pigs, which abound in Binh Hung and villages in the safe area, are nowhere to be found here at Cao Dai Vam. No longer can the villagers afford to buy livestock and poultry. Progress, and with it, individual liberty, have been stilled. And into this void, the communists have injected the ingredient of fear. Human beings frightened into an empty life because of the fear of torture and reprisal. These are the people who will decide the fate of Vietnam, and perhaps all of Asia. The peasants, the people in the middle who know nothing of the philosophies of communism or democracy, who want only to work and live in peace. As a result, they may support Father Hoa 1 minute and the Viet Cong the next. For the peasant to support you, you must either threaten him or provide him with security. The people of Binh Hung are now taking the first steps to bring security to Cao Dai Vam. The jungle which surrounds the village is being cut back by Father's men. The effectiveness of the enemy is diminished by more than half if it has no place to hide. The next step will be to establish an outpost with 100 men to use it as a base of operations, to roam the area in small guerrilla bands, seeking the enemy, hitting him, until he finally backs off and moves elsewhere. Then the route to the sea will be open. The people of Cao Dai Vam and other villages will be safe again and free to rebuild their lives. But until then, the struggle will continue. A scout has found a Viet Cong patrol in the jungle nearby. A mortar crew fires a few rounds in their direction, more in contempt than in seriousness, to say in effect, we will make these people safe, and there's nothing you can do about it. Back at Binh Hung, the village stockade imprisons 150 Viet Cong captured in battle. These are maximum security prisoners, hardcore communists. But seeing firsthand that life in Binh Hung is better than from whence they came, within 6 months, even they'll choose to desert communism and begin a new life somewhere within Father Hua's district. Viet Cong women and children captured while fighting alongside their menfolk are no different in appearance than the women and children of Binh Hung. They've been born and raised in this area. Their husbands and fathers are the so-called Viet Cong agent, a peasant by day, a guerrilla soldier by night. Here, the weapons of war are something priceless. The hero is the man who buries his weapon in the mud before he dies so the enemy can't find it. Many of these weapons have changed hands and sides 2 or 3 times. A Viet Cong favorite is the hidden spike, an aboriginal kind of landmine. Spikes driven into individual stakes or into boards, a dozen at a time, then camouflaged under mud or water level. For the barefooted or tennis-shoed attacker, the primitive little weapon serves its purpose. A mortar fashioned from pipe. And for the unarmed Viet Cong, a dummy weapon carved from wood to frighten villagers into believing he's well armed. The communists are masters at propaganda. They ply their ability with reams and reams of reading material, posters, and lectures. Here in the rice lands of South Vietnam, the communist doctrine has been preached and propagandized for 20 years. For 20 years, natives of this area have heard the hate talk that North Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh, Asia's #2 communist, should be president of South Vietnam, that the South should be liberated. Peasants sold on communism become hardcore Viet Cong agents. They, by fear, recruit thousands of others like 18-year-old Vo Van Thai. Through Father Hua's lieutenant, Thai told us his rice farmer father had died, leaving him responsible for his mother, 5 sisters, and brother. Thai knew nothing about communism, didn't care, didn't want to join or fight with the Viet Cong, but he lived in enemy territory. He was young, able, so he had no choice, either fight or be punished by death. He fought as a Viet Cong agent for 3 months, was captured in an ambush 2 miles from Binh Hung, carrying a homemade rifle. When he's released from Binh Hung, young Thai says he'll go back, get his family, and bring them to live somewhere in the area inside the safe perimeter. Thai has learned fast how different life can be. But as we interviewed him, Thai's small young body shook with fear. It may be months or years before young Thai will ever feel completely free again. It's airdrop day at Binh Hung. This happens at least once every week, when a lumbering C-47 from Saigon makes pass after pass over the village, dropping supplies. This is an important propaganda tool for Father Hoa, for his people to have cigarettes, for the villagers in the area to know that the people are not cut off from the world, although the communists have cut them off by controlling the water routes. Undamageable goods, like these crates of shoes, are dropped in free fall. The more delicate supplies come down by parachute. Supplies come in the main from CARE. The CARE field director in Vietnam keeps in close touch with Father Hoa, knows of his needs from day to day, and can thus supply the village with the things needed most. Although this is Asia's rice bowl, rice is one of the supplies needed most this year. The Viet Cong have sabotaged more than 2/3 of the district's rice crop by breaking down dikes and flooding the rice lands with salt water. Father has promised to keep the 15,000 people under his jurisdiction in the district in rice, and CARE has pledged to help him as long as the contributions hold out. Other critical needs are building materials, medical supplies, clothing, arms, and ammunition. As long as the help continues, as long as airdrops keep coming, the people of Binh Hung and Father Hoa can continue their expansion of freedom. In the main, the continued success or eventual failure depends on that. With more help, the potential is limitless. This is Mrs. Lee and her 2-year-old daughter. The airdrop has brought her child badly needed canned milk. In front of Mrs. Lee's house, her sons prepare her husband's sampan for an afternoon of fishing. The sampan is kept submerged above water and exposed to the high heat it seems would quickly dry out and expand. This is Mr. Lee. He and his family were part of the original settlers of Binh Hung. He was one of the first villagers to fire a shot at the Viet Cong on Christmas Eve, 1959, while Father was giving Mass. Mr. Lee is very proud of his oldest son, 19-year-old Vinh Lee, who's become one of the village's bravest young soldiers. The Lees were members of Father Hua's parish in Kwantung, South China. Mr. Lee made his living as a fisherman. During the war, he joined a guerrilla band to fight the Japanese. When the communists took China, Mr. Lee was imprisoned, then released because he was not an intellectual. Since then, the Lee family has followed Father Hoa in his trek from north to south. And now today, because of his faith in Father Hoa and the determination Father instilled in him and the others, Mr. Lee is safe and free to go fishing, to provide for his family, to make his home more comfortable. At first it had 1 room, now it has 4. Mr. Lee realizes that death is always imminent, but he believes that still better days can come, as they have in the last 2.5 years for his young daughter and for all of his children. He believes the communists will be defeated in his lifetime. It is this hope which keeps the Lee family and others from defeat. At the dinner table, the family talks of the future. Reflection on the past isn't as popular, because most of it has been sad. Mr. Lee says that all he knows about life in America is that it's good and happy. And he's proud because this life is coming to his family, because his table is filled with food, because his children are safe. Although the threat against the village is not as great as it was in the early days, the security can never afford to weaken. The pleasures of the dinner hour are over, but now duty calls. Young Lee will stand his 4 hours in a watchtower on the wall. And to maintain security, even those who man the village bakery will also stand guard in a way. Not only are these proficient bakers, but also deadly accurate mortarmen. Every night they bake enough bread for everyone in the village. They do their baking at night because this is when the mortars are always needed to fire on a Viet Cong concentration. It's a practical arrangement as long as their timing is good. Comes the alert, they'll dash out of the bakery, leaving their delicious product in the oven, fire off a few rounds and make it back just as the browning of the bread has reached perfection. They very rarely miss their targets or burn any bread. The Lee family is Catholic, as are 60% of the 1,200 Binh Hung villagers. The balance of the village's religious makeup is Buddhist or Muslim. In the district of Hai Yen, 30% of the populace is Catholic, making it higher than the Vietnamese national average of 20%. So even though busy with his duties as a general, mayor, doctor, judge, and teacher to his people, Father Hoa has still been able to further his religious convictions. Father gives Mass in the Binh Hung Church every morning at 7. Prayers are said every night at 6. The last rites are being given for a young soldier who died during the night. Ironically, he didn't die from the wounds of war, but rather from a stomach ache. He complained of severe stomach pains for 3 days. Father Hoa did what he could for him, but it wasn't enough. And now, in simple dignity, the lad's family and comrades escort him to his burial. Some crystals, rice, bananas, personal effects, and uncooked chicken will be buried with him. His casket will be taken through the wall to the village cemetery 500 yards out in the swamp. The coffin will rest on a base of mud piled up above the water level. Then the casket will be completely covered with mud until it is a mound 5 feet high, and then the burial is complete.